What's going on, y'all? We're back and we're here doing Broncos talk. Oddly enough, it's a little later than I wanted it to be. It's almost 1:40 in the morning on Wednesday, and of course, enjoyed Victory Tuesday. Actually, wound up coming home from work and just dozing off, but I wanted to hop on real quick because, I mean, it was just an enjoyable night. It was a hell of a victory, and the game itself was insane. I mean, 73 points, that's something you don't see a whole lot of, and especially with it being a Monday night game, it was actually appropriate. Jameis came through, did his thing, but of course, as I expected, and I even pointed this out a couple times, the defense is going to end up forcing him into turnovers, but at the same time, he certainly made his mark. But before we go too much into any of those details, I do need to talk about the release of receiver Josh Reynolds real quick. This one's really, really interesting because, of course, you've actually seen the emergence in recent weeks of a Devon Vele, Marvin Mims, and even a Troy Franklin for that matter. And of course, you can't take away from what you've gotten out of the number one guy in Cortland Sutton, and even little Jordan Humphrey has actually made some plays that have actually helped with the Broncos' success this season. That being said, of course, you can't act like it wasn't true with Josh Reynolds before going on IR with the finger, but then, of course, there was the unfortunate incident after leaving the Cub. He actually gets shot, and what are the odds you have two wide receivers in the NFL actually getting shot at some point? Obviously, Ricky Purcell, that was earlier. Still, I guess more training camp time was about when that happened. But either way, he's come back. He's actually been relatively effective for the 49ers. I was thinking we could still see that with a Josh Reynolds, and moreover, especially as we get closer to playoff time, it just doesn't hurt having another body on the field. And maybe that still could be the case. Maybe they actually bring him back to the practice squad. I'm hearing that's actually an option, and that'll be, of course, once he's cleared waivers, but, you know, one way or another, it's going to be real interesting if they don't bring him back, if he doesn't clear waivers, or if he winds up maybe signing elsewhere. I would like to think this is an opportunity to bring up an A.T. Perry. I feel like a lot of us in Broncos country have been interested in that move, but one way or another, I definitely want to wish the best to Josh Reynolds. Again, coming back from something like a gunshot wound is no fucking joke. Not that I know from experience, but I gotta imagine that it's not a lot of fun. But nonetheless, we're gonna move along here, and we're gonna talk about one of the big stars of the game, and that's Nick Benito. And he's actually been probably the star, not named Pat Surtain, and I guess you could even argue Riley Moss to some degree, of the Broncos defense. But to me, it's just been incredible seeing what this man has actually done in literally just what has been 13 games body of work. I may actually be embellishing that a bit because I think he might have missed a game or two, but all the same, just the production and the emergence. I mean, it's funny because a lot of us were looking at Baron Browning as being the guy who is the new Von Miller, but it's actually been Benito, and oddly enough, he's very, very close to getting double-digit sacks. I think he actually got double-digit sacks last night, or Monday night rather, if I recall correctly, but if he hasn't, he's on the verge of it, and he's absolutely gonna get it. But for me, you know, he's become easily that stalwart along with Surtain that It's actually going to be just a matter of not only them continuing to gel together and grow, but just all the things that you're seeing that, in the coming years, it's just going to get better and better. I mean, it's a really, really young defense when you get to thinking about it, especially, again, with these stars like Benito, like Pat Surtain, and they're not even 25 yet. So it only gets better from here, and just to think what they can actually add at this point is, hard to imagine. But, again, when Riley's able to come back, he'll definitely be that focal point. Shout out also to Jaquan McMillan, also got the game-winning pick six that actually put it away for us, and I just can't say enough about these guys right now. It's definitely been phenomenal to watch. But with that in mind, of course, we got to get here into the playoff picture, and this is where it's going to be really, really interesting. Broncos are currently sitting at the 7th seed behind Baltimore, who they do have the tiebreaker at 8-5, given the blowout win a few weeks ago over the Broncos. They're not quite the team we thought they were from that day, and I would imagine, just based on what we're seeing right now, if the Broncos were to face them again, there's a good chance that they would actually win. However, playoffs are a little bit different, and of course, there's really not any experience on the Broncos roster to where you could actually say that with the Ravens. And let's also remember the fact that each of the 2 times that the Ravens went on to win the Super Bowl, they ended up being the Broncos in the playoffs. So I kind of want to avoid that as a scenario. It's going to be really interesting to see if they're actually able to catch Pittsburgh for that number 3 seed. But at this point, I can't see them being any lower than that if they were to win the division. But again, that's going to be a bit of an if, and Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson at the helm is looking as good as they've looked in a really, really long time. I mean, if anything, I feel like they're definitely a threat, not only to beat Kansas City coming up here in a couple of weeks, but they might actually find their way into the Super Bowl, believe it or not. I mean, they actually have a lot of the means to do it. Granted, the rushing game, similar to the Broncos, is not nearly as consistent as you would like to think, especially with a Najee Harris, but all the same, looking at this, I'd like to think with the upcoming rematch against the Chargers in a couple of weeks after the bye, and going against the Colts right out of the bye, if the Broncos continue to keep the win streak going through those 2 games, then they're really in a good situation at that point. And I feel like at that point you're looking at a scenario where 5 seed isn't out of the question. I would say certainly 6 seed is definitely very, very realistic, but we got an awful lot of football left, but it's very, very good to get this win, especially going into the bye. And of course, given that Benito the other night did look a little bit gimpy for a moment or 2, it's just going to be good, because whatever it was, he'll be able to rest that. We're even going to be able to bring guys back that are going to be coming off of IR and actually be healthy, when we'll be at least another week closer to getting Riley Moss back. It can just, truth of the matter is that it can only go up from here. But y'all know what it is. Let me know what y'all think down below. Y'all know that deal. Like, share, subscribe, and of course, this has been your time with A and J, and I thank you for spending it with me.